Okay. All right. Hello. Show off my little breathe reminder. Hi, my name is Beth Sarver, and I am the trauma outreach. No, I'm not that anymore. I am the resilience coordinator at the Academy for Integrated Arts. Used to be the trauma outreach coordinator at Truman Medical Center here in Kansas City, Missouri. And I'm excited about what the Integrate Trauma Informed Network is doing, and happy to be a part of it. So tonight I wanted to just share with you at the end of my workday a little bit about really one of my passions, which is brain-based de-escalation. And I have kind of the top 3 strategies and top 3 tools that I use every day to make it possible for me to do what I do. So at the Academy for Integrated Arts, I am the resilience coordinator. And what that means is about 70% of my time is spent responding to the needs of students and teachers and classrooms, and often doing brain-based de-escalation and other behavioral interventions with kids who I know have trauma, with kids I don't know. And so my goal tonight is to just share a little bit about how I've developed the practice of brain-based de-escalation and hopefully inspire you all to learn more. So the number one most important strategy for using brain-based de-escalation, it really begins with self-care. So before you can ever guide yourself or another to calm down your nervous system, to de-escalate your mind, your body, your spirit, you first have to have a strong sense of how to care for yourself. And so when I talk about self-care, I mean not just getting pedicures and manicures and eating healthy or exercising, but also really tending to the mind, the body, the spirit, and the relationships that make up your life. And that includes your family, as well as your colleagues and the people that you serve. And so certainly self-care is a big strategy, and it's one that this network talks a lot about. So I'm not going to go into much detail there, but I will say that the number one strategy that I use for all of those is mindfulness meditation. And it's a practice that I've been engaged in for a number of years. And it's something that I still practice and am seeking growth in. But that practice is one that really helps me to be able to have the sense of awareness of self and the sense of awareness of others around me that makes it possible for me to even think about this idea of helping another person regulate their nervous system. The second strategy that I use is self-study. So one of the most important things that I've learned is that, when you're working with folks who are very stress reactive or who get overwhelmed or have emotional flooding, is that there's a lot about the human brain that we aren't taught. And so it's through my own and your own journey to understand the nature of the human brain and the body and our relationships, that we can begin to really understand the power that we have to regulate our nervous system. And so the two kind of go-to books for me, the first one that I would recommend is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. I recommend this in all the trainings that I do for any professional that's working with folks with lots of trauma, or anyone that has their own trauma history that they're maybe looking to go a bit deeper into their healing. I found this book after I had already done lots of great therapy on my own childhood trauma. And this really took my healing to the next level because it really helped me to understand the nature of my brain development. My first and most significant traumatic life experience happened at the age of 4. And so in reading that book, I really began to understand how my brain developed over time and how those brain patterns, those thought patterns, as well as those triggers and my stress response patterns really developed and kept me safe in many ways, and in other ways kept me in harm's way over the years. So that self-study not only helped me to heal more deeply, but it also helped me to better understand those people that I serve. And I think one of my favorite quotes from this book is that it's right at the beginning. He writes, "After trauma, the world is experienced with a different nervous system." So like the more I learned about just how my nervous system works, the more I was able to tap into this idea of guiding another person's nervous system to a state of calm. And in the book, The Body Keeps the Score, as well as in The Whole Brain Child, this is the workbook, but the book itself is wonderful. And Dan Siegel is really easy to listen to. And he and Tina Payne Bryson both read the Audible version. So if you don't like to read, you can listen. It's really powerful brain-based de-escalation tips, and it goes into extraordinary detail, and it really helps you to think through your own, again, trauma history or childhood upbringing that really shaped the way that your brain works, and thus the way you parent or give care to children. And so, but both of these books really helped me to not only understand myself and my brain, but the brain in general. And so the self-study really is what prepares you for the actual practice of doing brain-based de-escalation. So I'll say more about the tools that I learned from these books in a moment. But the third practice the third strategy is fail forward and reflect. I think the best way to learn about how to do brain-based de-escalation is first these two strategies, but then to try it and to not do it right, and to notice that, and to try again, and to fail again, and to notice that, and so on and so forth. So when you're in the act of noticing that you yourself need to be de-escalated, or that another person needs to be de-escalated, really there's many opportunities for things to go wrong. Being overly quick to respond can lead to that sense of failure, and also being too slow to respond. And so it's a journey to kind of find the ability to read yourself and others. And so I just anticipate failure. And as an artist and entrepreneur, I've learned that it's always, good to fail and to do it fast, to fail forward, to reflect, to pivot, to learn from your mistakes and move on. And so with those three strategies, you're really set up for doing the hard work of being present for yourself when you're escalated, or for a child or another person who's escalated. So first is radical self-care, and especially tending to the mind. The second is self-study that really helps you to grow the skills that maybe, especially as it relates to the nature of the brain and how it works. And then lastly, develop that practice of failing forward and reflecting. And those each one of those could be its own session on here. But I want to spend most of the time sharing with you the tools that I use on a daily basis at the Academy for Integrated Arts, where I serve pre-K through 6th grade students. And throughout the course of the day, I really most often don't know who is going to be in need of support and what the situation is. And so that self-care piece comes into play every day. And it's always a work in progress, because not every day do I do my very best self-care. And I feel it always when I am not. So when I think about the best tools for brain-based de-escalation, I think the number one is to begin with prevention. And so at the Academy for Integrated Arts, we've worked really hard to develop a sense of curiosity and creative exploration around the brain. And so pre-K through 6th grade, over the course of a year at AFIA, will not only talk about brains and read about brains, but they'll actually make brains. And when we have a dialogue about brains, and we make them, and we even name the different parts of the brain, something that we really connect with. So I use, for the brain education piece, I use the Mind Up curriculum as a kind of a jumping off point. And then, because it has lots of great lessons that are already developed, but I use it kind of as a jumping off point. So I think outside of that box. But so when kids make their brains, they come up with new names. So this is the amygdala down here, and Spider-Man was the name of one of my students' brains last year. And so often when I would join in with him to support him and help him de-escalate himself, or to, be the one who's like really guiding him in a very hands-on way to de-escalate, I would ask him, and I would guide his hand to his heart, and I would say, is Mr. Spider-Man in control right now? Because through our lessons on the brain, he named his amygdala Mr. Spider-Man, and we came up with this strategy that I would ask him, is Mr. Spider-Man in control? And he would then answer, yes. And I would say, will you tell yourself and your wise leader brain that you know just what to do? So surprisingly, that worked. And with this particular student, Mr. Spider-Man, his inner security guard was just the awareness that he was in there, that the amygdala was in there, helped him to kind of step outside of the experience and actually begin to name it. Name Mr. Spider-Man, name those big feelings, and then to take control and to really give the power back to his wise leader brain. Now, that didn't always work every time I joined in with this particular young man, but what I found is that it worked with many students, younger and older. And so then I had to start remembering everybody's names of their wise leader or their amygdala or their Spider-Man. One young man named his amygdala Sonic, like Sonic the Hedgehog, because he would go so fast. He would get triggered so fast, and he would go so deep into his anger. And so that common language and that rapport that we developed through the brain education pieces really was like storing up riches for, or putting money in the bank, as some would say, so that when it was time to respond to an incident or something that happened that was big and explosive, that not only did I know the words, but I also had the experience of figuring out how to build a brain with a child who maybe doesn't have the motor skills to do so. So just the journey to create something together and to problem solve has helped when it was time to de-escalate that student. So the brain education piece is not just building a brain, but it's also thinking about like, what are the things that happen in our brains and how do we bring ourselves out of our lower brain or our downstairs brain or our security guard brain and back up to the wise leader brain or the watchtower brain. And so through lots of practice and role play and stories and read alouds and puppets, we can teach kids to just have this level of understanding about this natural part of our brains. And so when I've asked little people, I've asked them, which part of your brain do you think you're operating out of? And this is, of course, after we've done a little bit of more just grounding, which is more of the bottom-up regulation, which I'll talk about shortly, that they're able to say, I'm in my amygdala, or, in my brain stem, I'm ready to fight. When they can like articulate to the best of their ability, using the best of their memory, like which part of their brain they're operating out of, and then to think, okay, what do I know I need to do to bring myself back to be ready to learn and be operating out of my wise leader brain. And while it is an oversimplification of the processes of the brain, it's really developmentally appropriate for children, and it makes it like accessible. And it's empowering to be able to name your brain parts and what they're doing and how that's causing you to make choices or not. It's just been a journey of fun and surprise for us at AFIA, and I look to learn a lot more this year as we expand that program of brain education and brain sculpture. So that's kind of the prevention and to responsive. So if we can give them some education about how the brain works and then have them get creative with that and kind of even build a culture of brain education and brain awareness, then when it's time to respond, they're so much more ready, willing, and able to kind of co-regulate with you, to receive the support that you're bringing. But that's kind of best case scenario. If you have a really good connection with a student who really gets the brain stuff and is really bonded with that material. Other times you're working with somebody who has no clue about the brain and doesn't really care, or they're so escalated that even if they love the brain and know a lot about it, that knowledge is not accessible in the moment. And in those moments when folks are really upset and overwhelmed, the key strategies that I use in both books would talk about bottom-up regulation. And when you think about that, basically bottom-up means that the topmost part of your brain, your cortex, your wise leader, your executive functioning is not online and is not accessible. And so when we think about bottom-up regulation, we really have to think about breathing, a little bit of movement, and touch. And while not every kid you want running the school, sometimes if they are running, that means that they're trying their best to regulate. And so there are several different strategies for breathing, touch, and movement, or tools. The first tool that I'm going to share is this weighted blanket, which I made, which is quite an endeavor, and they're worth every penny. If you buy one for $200, it's worth every penny. So I have this in my office, and I know that many kids just really need to sit with a weighted blanket on their lap or around their shoulders, or lay down and have it covering like from their shoulders down their back. So depending on the situation, this weighted blanket, which also happens to look like a big chocolate bar, has a wonderful impact and just gives some good deep pressure. And if you wrap it around you, it kind of feels like you're getting a hug. And touch is a wonderful strategy for helping not everybody, but most people to find their calm, because your grounded presence really does help them to calm themselves down without even knowing that they're doing it. Just by being willing to receive touch And so I will offer kids a hand massage. I will ask if I can rub their back. And for those who I have, a history with and I've joined in with many times, I'll know just what to do. And I'll know that they want their fingertips with some gentle pressure, or they want to play with a soft lovey that's in the resilience room. But the other main strategy is breathing techniques. And so one way to do a breathing technique where you get all three, you get breathing, you get touch, and you get movement, is to synchronize your breath with the movement of your hands. And you can start right at the heart. And this is a simple one that I teach as often as I possibly can to little people, where you really press in, so you really feel the pressure and your own power. And then as you breathe in, you rise up. And as you exhale, you come out. Exhaling everything, and then push again. And release. Breathing in. And so here you're getting the movement, you're also getting the breathing and the pressure and the touch, where they're giving that all to themselves. And this is a really good strategy to teach prior and then to guide them back into when you're working on de-escalation. The last thing I'll share is the love tuner. So this I found on Facebook and is something that I've shared widely with the folks in my school and other schools where I consult. It's called a love tuner. And so on occasion, I join in with somebody who is not just upset, but they are really lost in their stress response. They're super, distraught or sad, overwhelmed, really angry. And typically, there's just this handful of people who I find this works with really well in my school. It also works well with, people who aren't highly escalated. But basically what I do is it really helps to regulate me and my nervous system, which is essential to being able to join in with someone who's highly escalated. It's kind of a novel item, so it's kind of surprising. Like, typically kids who are having an adult come to work with them, often they don't think, that this sort of thing will happen. They think someone's going to tell them to be quiet, to calm down, to get it together, to fix their face, to do all of these things that we say to kids. But so this just has kind of this surprising impact. So I let them know I'm going to do it. I say, have I shown you my magical love tuner? And I'm a firm believer in magic, and this has proven to be magical a number of times. So then I breathe with the love tuner. It's 528 hertz in the key of C, the universal love vibration. So the first day that I got this thing and started using it, I joined in with a young man who was like super escalated, having a really hard time. He was trying so hard to push this bank of cubbies over, but he was pushing up against the wall. So his whole body was shaking, and he was sweaty and hot, and he was so mad. He was so lost in his anger. And I came up behind him, and I knew him well and had joined in with him many times. And I said, I'm right here with you. I can see that you're having a hard time. Can I help you calm down? He didn't hear me. And then I just said, I'm going to help you calm down. And I have this love tuner. And so I breathed with him, and I had my hand on his back, and I breathed using the love tuner, and I took 7 deep breaths. And by the time I was finishing the exhalation of my seventh breath, his entire body, which was so rigid and tense and shaking, was softening, and hands were dropping, and he was receiving help and a hug. And it was like magic. And every time I used it with this particular student, it worked something like that. Sometimes it took more than 7 breaths, but 7, 10, maybe 15. But I think not only is it novel, it's kind of weird, and a little bit surprising, but the power of vibration, and that particular vibration, I believe, not only helps me to regulate my nervous system and make me really grounded and ready for whatever is going to happen, whether that's somebody running or somebody hitting me or somebody just sharing something really hard with me. The vibration goes in not only to our ears, but into our whole body. And so what's been fun is to hear the stories of other professionals who've also found their way to having a love tuner and have used it in a school-based, situation to de-escalate someone. And again, I've also used it and had a student go like, stop. So not every tool is going to work every time. But what I will say is that there's so many tools out there and there are so many strategies out there that my best advice is to remember that brain-based de-escalation is a self-care practice. It starts with you. Often we need to know what it feels like to lose it and how to get ourselves back before we're able to understand and to empathize with someone who's lost it and to help them get themselves back. So every day I don't do this work perfectly. Every day I learn something new. And for the students that I serve and respond to most often, I found that they're my teacher. And every time I start to lose it, like in traffic or with a minor frustration that gets me, the more I've practiced mindfulness and the more that I've studied the brain, the more quickly I am able to bring myself back. And so I'll end today just by saying that brain-based de-escalation is a skill that takes time to develop. And it's more than just understanding how the brain works. It's really about giving it a go, trying a tool, learning more, trying something and failing, and then reflecting on it and figuring out piece by piece, bit by bit, how to better serve ourselves and each other. So I would love to continue this discussion in the comments. This is my first live chat, so I kind of feel like this has been a bit too rambly. So tomorrow I'll try to be more succinct, but I did cover all of the things that I've wanted to cover. Again, check out The Body Keeps the Score, amazing book, so much good, so much beauty, so much healing in this. And then The Whole Brain Child. This is chock full of wonderful strategies and tools for de-escalating and really understanding how to serve little people and to do it with grace and love. So until tomorrow, where I will work hard to not ramble, I wish you well, many blessings, and take good care.